Shadows of Nairobi. A story of intrigue, suspense, and betrayal. The city of Nairobi shone brightly at night with tall buildings lighting up the sky. Expensive cars roared through the streets carrying powerful men and women who controlled the city's wealth. But behind the beauty and riches, there were secrets, deep, dark secrets. It was a cool evening when Tony stepped out of his black Mercedes. He adjusted his suit, his sharp eyes scanning the entrance of the Royal Hotel. Tony was not just any man, he was rich, powerful, and feared. He owned businesses across the city and had friends in high places. Inside the hotel, in a private lounge, a man named Mark waited for him. Mark was younger, dressed in a simple shirt and jeans, but his eyes showed intelligence. He was Tony's right-hand man, the one who handled his secret deals. "Do you have it?" Tony asked as he sat down. Mark slid a black briefcase across the table. "It's all here. The documents, the accounts, everything." Tony opened the briefcase and smiled. Inside were papers worth billions, proof of secret land deals, hidden bank accounts, and the names of the most powerful men in the city. With these documents, Tony could control anyone. But something was wrong. Mark's hands were shaking. His eyes darted around nervously. "What's the problem?" Tony asked. Mark hesitated, then leaned closer. "Someone knows about the briefcase. I was followed." Tony's face darkened. He snapped the briefcase shut. "Who?" "I don't know," Mark whispered. "But they were watching me. I lost them in traffic, but I swear they knew." Tony stood up. He didn't believe in coincidences. Someone was after him, and that meant danger. That night, Tony took the briefcase to his mansion in Karan, one of Nairobi's wealthiest neighborhoods. His house was guarded like a fortress, with armed men at every gate. Inside, he locked the briefcase in his private safe. But he couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The next morning, Tony woke up to chaos. His head of security, Otis, was waiting for him at the door. "Sir, we have a problem." Tony frowned. "What is it?" Otis hesitated, then spoke. "The safe was opened last night. The briefcase is gone." Tony's blood ran cold. Only a few people knew about the briefcase. Someone close to him had betrayed him. "Who was on duty last night?" Tony asked, his voice low and dangerous. Otis hesitated. "Mark." Tony's hands curled into fists. He had trusted Mark like a brother. But now Mark was missing, and so was the briefcase. Tony wasted no time. He called his most trusted fixer, a woman named Linda. She was sharp, fearless, and had eyes everywhere in the city. "Find Mark," Tony ordered. "And find him fast." Linda nodded and left. Meanwhile, in a hidden apartment across town, Mark was sweating. He sat on a small couch, the stolen briefcase beside him. He had made the biggest mistake of his life, betraying Tony. But Mark had no choice. Someone else had forced his hand. And now, the real danger was just beginning. Mark sat in a dimly lit apartment in Eastleigh, his heart pounding. The black briefcase sat beside him, its contents worth more than his life. He had betrayed Tony, the most powerful man in Nairobi, and now he was running out of time. He pulled out his phone, his fingers trembling as he dialed a number. "It's done," he whispered. A calm voice answered, "Good. You have the documents?" "Yes." "Bring them to me. But be careful, Mark. Tony will not let you leave." Mark swallowed hard. He already knew that. At his mansion in Karan, Tony stood by the window, his jaw tight with anger. Linda, his trusted fixer, sat across from him, scrolling through messages on her phone. "Mark is a dead man," Tony said coldly. "Find him." Linda nodded. "I have my people searching. He won't get far." Tony turned to Otis, his head of security. "Get the men ready. I want this done tonight." Otis nodded and stepped out to make the calls. Tony clenched his fists. He had built his empire through power and fear, and no one, especially not Mark, would take that from him. Mark slipped through the crowded streets of downtown Nairobi, keeping his head low. He knew he was being followed. He could feel it. He ducked into a small hotel and took the stairs 2 at a time. Room 405. He knocked twice. The door opened slightly. A pair of sharp eyes studied him before letting him in. Inside stood a tall, well-dressed man, Victor Omondi, a politician with ambitions of becoming Nairobi's governor. He was one of Tony's biggest rivals. "You have it?" Victor asked. Mark nodded and handed him the briefcase. Victor opened it and smiled. "This is enough to bring Tony down," he said. "Bank accounts, illegal deals, bribes, everything." Mark shifted nervously. "You promised me protection." Victor's smile faded. "And you'll get it. But we need to be smart." Suddenly, there was a knock at the door. Mark's heart stopped. Victor pulled out a gun and signaled for silence. The knocking came again, louder this time. Then, the door burst open. Gunfire erupted. Mark dove behind the couch as Victor's guards fired back. Through the smoke, Mark saw them, Tony's men. Linda was leading them, her eyes cold and focused. Mark knew he had only seconds to escape. He grabbed the briefcase and bolted through the back door. Bullets whizzed past him as he ran down the fire escape. He hit the ground running, disappearing into the night. Linda stepped over Victor's lifeless body, shaking her head. "Slappy." She turned to her men. "Find Mark. Kill him." Mark ran through the dark streets, his breath ragged. He needed a plan. He needed help. He pulled out his phone and dialed a number he never thought he would. The voice on the other end answered, "Hello?" Mark hesitated. Then, he said, "I have something you want. But we need to talk alone." An hour later, Mark stood by the abandoned railway station in industrial area. The city lights flickered in the distance. He clutched the briefcase tightly. A black Range Rover pulled up. The door opened. Tony stepped out. For a long moment, they stared at each other. Then Tony spoke. "You made a mistake, Mark." Mark swallowed hard. "I had no choice. Victor threatened me." Tony nodded slowly. "And now he's dead. But you still have something that belongs to me." Mark took a deep breath. "I'll give it back if you let me go." Tony studied him for a long moment. Then, he nodded. "Give me the briefcase." Mark hesitated. Then, slowly, he handed it over. Tony opened it, flipping through the documents. Satisfied, he snapped it shut. "Thank you, Mark," he said. "You made the right choice." Mark exhaled in relief. "So, we are good?" Tony smiled. "Yes. We are good." Then, he stepped back. A single gunshot echoed through the night. Mark collapsed, his eyes wide with shock. Tony looked down at him, shaking his head. "You should have known better." He turned to Linda, who was holding the smoking gun. "Clean this up." Linda nodded. "And the documents?" Tony smirked. "Burn them. No one will ever touch me." As he walked back to his car, he glanced one last time at Mark's lifeless body. Nairobi belonged to him. And no one, not Mark, not Victor, not anyone, could change that. The end.